On some level, it kind of makes a lot of sense to kick off Season 9 of Doctor Who with a Dalek story, now being settled comfortably in this era and moving into Jon Pertwee's third season, bringing back such an iconic foe in a great way to keep up interest in the show, at least in theory, makes a ton of sense. The Daleks' first appearance in 5 years should be a big deal, but in this episode, it really isn't treated as such. They feel very much like an afterthought to this story. This one could basically function exactly the same without them, and just with a couple of mild alterations. And while I don't know if this was the case, it does very much feel like the Daleks were shoehorned into this episode after it was already at least partway written. So yeah, unfortunately the Daleks aren't very intimidating or menacing, and don't actually do much to justify bringing them back after the evil of the Daleks. And I think it is worth mentioning that I did watch this story through BritBox in the US, meaning that I watched the version with updated special effects and the Nicholas Briggs Dalek voice.
Whoever is operating the time machine is an enemy of the Daleks. All enemies of the Daleks must be destroyed.
And I didn't really have a choice on that. It was the only version that they had on the streaming platform. If I did, I would have watched the original, but sadly I couldn't actually choose, so just so you know, this was the actual version that I watched. And this story is mostly a rather enjoyable one. We have 2 different time periods going on, the 1970s and some 200 years in the future. And there are some people traveling from the future who are going backwards in order to alter history, and the way that these 2 timelines work together was an element that I actually enjoyed. And at 4 parts long, this one doesn't really drag. It feels like it stays just the appropriate amount of time for the story, even if what it is doing doesn't quite always work. And while the Daleks weren't, that good in this serial, there is one thing that I will be taking away from this one, and that's Jo Grant. Now, don't get too excited, I'm not going to start suddenly singing the praises of Jo, but somehow in this story, she mostly worked for me. And I think that comes down to her performance chemistry with Jon Pertwee as the Doctor. The 2 of them balance off of each other quite well in this, which I just enjoyed. And while she hasn't worked all that well for me in the past, I think she's starting to grow on me, which I'm rather excited about, especially since she's going to be around for a bit longer. And don't get me wrong, she doesn't do all that much in this actual serial. She's just there, but she does have a bit to do, and for the most part, I enjoyed her.
You couldn't get us a bite to eat, could you, miss? I'm famished.
Hang on.
Jo?
All in a good cause.
And one of the things I'm enjoying about this era of Doctor Who is how connected certain things feel. They reference colony in space in this episode as well as things that had happened in previous stories, and that was something that I liked as an element in the show. Also, I just wanted to make a note about the TARDIS. There's been a few times during Pertwee's run where he will take the console outside of the TARDIS and put it somewhere, often in a unit HQ, and each time it happens, I keep thinking that it's a new TARDIS interior, especially the first time it happened back in the Ambassadors of Death. I thought for a bit that it was actually a new TARDIS interior, but, it wasn't. But by the way, I would have really liked it because, I don't know, it's just kind of different, honestly. And yeah, after some experience, I'm more quickly able to tell that no, it's not a new interior, it's just a different room, which is something to get used to, I guess, just going and bringing the TARDIS console to different rooms. It's kind of fun, to be honest, but it did throw me a bit at first. I'm still enjoying Jon Pertwee as the Doctor. He's super charismatic and an absolutely delightful presence. He does still lean a little bit more into an action hero than I would personally like, particularly in Part 4, which is a bit of a shame, but it doesn't detract from him all that much, and as I've said before, it's just not one of my favorite aspects of Doctor Who and the character of the Doctor.
Do you believe in ghosts, Brigadier?
Let's be serious, Doctor.
I am.
Oh, come along, Doctor, come along.
Oh, my mistake. I was forgetting the unimaginative nature of the military mind.
The Brigadier doesn't do a lot in this one. He's basically just there, not much to really praise or criticize. He's busy for most of the story, and I appreciated how minimal Unit was in this one. I don't take much issue with them. I actually quite like Benton, but keeping their involvement to a minimum did help to make this story feel slightly fresher. Overall, I found Day of the Daleks to be a rather enjoyable serial. if altogether somewhat unremarkable. It has an enjoyable story that plays around a decent amount with its two time periods. John Pertwee is enjoyable as a Doctor, and I'm finding that Joe Grant is growing on me, at least to an extent, and even though the Daleks aren't particularly well utilized throughout the story, it's still a really engaging one that I enjoyed, and I'm going to give Day of the Daleks a rating of 7.25 out of 10. And that's going to do it for now, folks. Be sure to let me know your thoughts on this story down below. I'm curious as to what you have to say about it. Naturally, it is the first story of Season 9, and again, this is where I'm actually starting to like Jo Grant a bit, so I'm curious if other people had a similar reaction in terms of how she was characterized with the season and her relationship with the Doctor. I'm not entirely sure how other people feel, but it does feel markedly different from what we got in the previous season. So yeah, feel free to leave your thoughts on this story down below if you feel like doing so, and I do hope to see you around for this upcoming Sunday when I'll be reviewing The Curse of Peladon, but if not, that is absolutely fine, so long as you know that I appreciate your time here today. And with that said, thank you very much for watching, take care, and have a lovely week.